Are there any other things that come up on the agendas of the upcoming conferences around TCPA and other privacy related issues that marketers should be aware of and should certainly keep themselves up to date on?
100%. I mean, I think two of the big ones right now that are not law yet, but are potentially likely to become law over the next few months or so, is that a definition of what a robocall is. It used to be sort of an automated dialer platform, but now it includes AI and text messaging, which, like I just elaborated on, I think that's the text messaging is sort of the dangerous part for some companies. But then also there's a proposed law for opting out of something. They're proposing that any type of opt out of a message will opt out of all messages.
Mm.
So let's just say I'm a Bank of America, and I get a message to for overdraft or something, I don't know, and I say stop. That stop message is opting out of any other text messages from any other for any other reason or call from anybody from Bank of America to call me. It's opting. It's like a global opt out, which is kind of crazy.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Super excited to be chatting with Michael Ferree, who also wears multiple hats, mostly in the conference business. The common theme, for Michael is that they all tend to be lead related or lower funnel sales related. So, Michael, why don't you give us the elevator pitch on your two conferences and your awards?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Kevin. Yeah, we've got really three different brands, but you're absolutely right. They're all sort of layered together in some common goal, which is obviously driving sales to businesses through performance marketing or calls, and looking at sort of the full funnel. So lead generation world really does take a look at everything from driving traffic, on page conversions, to lead conversions into leads into sales. So it really does follow that whole pathway of a prospect. And then contact.io really is focused on calls. So it's pay per call, it's hot transfers, it's inbound sales calls and prospects coming through the telephone, and then it's outbound call strategy. So how do I get a hold of those prospects that maybe have come through a lead or a call? How do I utilize text, messages, and telephones for sales? Because really, when you think about all the conferences out there as far as telephony goes, it's generally customer service related, and not so much performance, what I call performance calls. So,
Right,
and then of
right.
course we've got AFI Expo, AFI Awards Gala, which is taking place in July, right in front of Affiliate Summit East, and that's just a really, really cool opportunity to highlight both companies and individuals that are doing good things in the industry. And I think that's always a really important thing to do. So I'm really proud of that.
Cool, cool. One thing I'd love your thoughts on, like I've noticed that one odd byproduct of the smartphone becoming ubiquitous is that now like calling is back, right? Because it's like one click and you can call, right? And the phone knows exactly what to do with a phone number when you tap it, right? So whether that's a unique phone number or not, or whether, it's tracked, it's sort of like the phone has almost been resuscitated as a modality, right? Whereas it used to be just lead forms, and then it would be up to the outbound sales team to sort of do the follow up. So I'd love to, get your thinking about that from the perspective of, should the call to action actually be that call into a hot transfer environment?
So you're right. It's been a paradigm shift, to be honest with you, how telephones is using, and it's obviously no secret to anybody that has a cell phone that doesn't pick up the phone when they don't know the number, right?
Yeah.
So now people aren't picking up the phone if it's going out to you and you don't know, it doesn't you don't recognize the caller ID or whatever it may be. But it is also the convenience factor of click to call. So if I see something, I can easily initiate an inbound phone call into a company via the phone, and that's what people are doing. Their growth. I mean, I don't have numbers to quote,
Mhm.
but calls and the pay-per-call sort of environment or industry is growing tremendously year over year because of the challenges of making those outbound calls and getting hold of prospects, but also because people are recognizing the convenience factor of just simply clicking and calling into a company that can get somebody on the phone. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, it's been negative, and it's also positive in a different way too.
Right, right. So, obviously the other element of the phone is SMS and, the ability to receive text messages. I sort of feel like from a permission perspective, like the bar to be worthy of my inbox in my as a text is just so much higher than email. Like, you'll see that a lot of e-commerce sites or whatever, they'll like try to tempt me by holding a carrot out, get me to subscribe to their email list, and then they usually immediately ask for the phone number, right? And the bar for me to share is considerably higher. And I also feel like not just initially, but like the relevance for me to stay subscribed has to be really, really high. Do you find that that's the case from the folks who are, at your shows talking about
Yeah,
SMS?
I mean, SMS is extremely important from a multiple different factors of how you're contacting the prospect. But if you can get that subscription through an SMS, meaning they're opting into getting those text messages from you, it really is a game changer because this isn't something that I have to log into. It's not something I actually have to click on to read the email beyond the subject line. I get a preview of that text message and I can read about 3 sentences immediately without even wanting to, right? I'm going to check my text message, right?
Yeah,
And so once you get that subscription of somebody or that opt in, you really have to be mindful and really take care of that relationship because if you can continue it on, it will be very, very useful and very powerful and generate a lot of opportunities for you. But if you take advantage of it, it's so easy to say stop,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. That's a great point. You mentioned sort of the way a person skims, right, the text, almost reading it by accident before they got a chance to decide they hated it. One of the behavior change that I've noticed and might have really interesting implications is that voicemails a lot of times don't get listened to. They get transcribed, right? And so they end up on your phone looking a whole lot like a text message. And it has the telephony community sort of started to take advantage of that and decided like, okay, let's leave the voicemail message. We know they probably won't listen to it, but it may get transcribed. And so we have to use language in there that gets the point across right away, right?
Yeah.
No introduction, just boom right into there so that it shows up there.
I think that's definitely one of the biggest conversations when you're talking about outbound contact strategies that happen both at Lead Generation World and Contact.io is okay, you're not going to get a hold of somebody. They're not going to let's just come to that conclusion that they're not going to pick up the phone.
Yeah,
So how do you utilize the tool in a way that they're going to be able to comprehend, read it, ingest it, and then take action on it without picking up the phone? So
right.
you have to be very thoughtful of how you leave a voicemail, what your caller ID says, how they're expecting you to contact them via the telephone. I mean, they should know your phone number. It should say, did it on the caller ID, all those sorts of things for them to reach it. And your voicemail should be very clear and concise. Don't ramble on. All this, all these little things that kind of you didn't really think about now has to be thought about because, as you mentioned, not only does it get transcribed, but it also now on my phone gets transcribed in real time. So when someone's leaving a voicemail on my iPhone, I can start seeing the words start being transcribed in real time.
Yeah,
And so, it's pretty cool because we can see that all and we don't have to pick up the phone.
right.
But it is something that has to be thought about when doing because we're talking, every single large sort of ticket item when you think of like mortgage or insurance or solar or home services, they all take place generally over the phone, and a lot now via text. So you do have to be more thoughtful about the content or the communications that you're putting out there for sure.
Yeah, I almost deployed my tech team to build something because and I'm sure these are a lot of exhibitors at your show because it's Salesforce automation and CRM, particularly for outbound teams. And there are a few of those platforms where, the human starts the call, and then once the voicemail picks up, they'll essentially hot transfer it into a recording, right? And so then the recording, which could be the same person's voice, is canned, right? I pre-record that, and it basically says, "Hey, it's Kevin from Did It. Not sure if you're having any SEO problems, blah blah blah." Right?
Mhm.
And so that's fine, But if a person were listening to that voicemail, they'd probably hear the little click as like the
Mhm.
transfer happens, right? But when it's transcribed, you wouldn't hear it. And then I
Exactly.
thought about it, like, well, how hard would it be for me to train an AI to speak in my voice?
Yep.
Probably pretty easy. And then once that was done, it wouldn't be that much harder for me to actually allow that AI to leave a very customized message to you based on everything I know about you, right?
Mhm.
I'd probably want to see the script first before I said it's okay. I could read it in my voice later. But as long as the script looked good to me, it could reference the fact that, we went golfing last year, blah, blah, blah. Like it could do all sorts of amazing things in my voice and can be completely impossible to tell that it wasn't me. So I talked to my coders about it, and they're like, yeah, it's probably about 800 or 900 hours worth of coding to get it really working smoothly. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not the only one thinking this. Like somebody else is probably already working on it, maybe 5 companies. And so I'll just wait until one of them has it done and maybe then I'll use it. But it's really, when you think about the overlay of AI into the call centers and contact centers, it's really incredible.
It is, and so sophisticated and so well done, that, I was on a call I got a call the other day, and I knew right away it was automated, but it was so well done that any maybe layman wouldn't know that that was sort of an automated call. It was just so organic, talking like I do with inflections and different things,
Yeah,
and it was great. But here's the problem, that anybody in this industry needs to be very mindful of. It's the federal government and regulations. And so, from a regulatory standpoint, there are already proposed actions within the last week, 2 weeks, a month,
wow.
that are looking at, uh, having to opt in to receive, AI voice calls that are duplicating human behavior, both via text and calls.
Mm,
So you think, oh, okay, I just won't, we already kind of think a robocall of a automated AI call already sort of lumped in together,
yeah,
but text, automated responses to text, like that's a little bit more complicated. I mean, now if they're going to say that you have to opt in to get an automated text, I would say most business related texts are all automated.
yeah,
They're not a real person sitting there typing a text, right? But they're acting, or they're written in such a fashion that they want to be organic and seem like there is somebody there. So if in fact, the regulations start to lump in text messaging and the use of AI as a robocall, I think that's going to pose some issues for some technology platforms and some users that do have built-in automated text, responses and all this sort of stuff into it. So it's a big thing when you're talking about calls. It's not just the success of them; it's also, are you being compliant, and the ever-changing landscape, these days for calls, because the government is very much focused on getting rid of robocalls. Thank God, right? Rightfully so. Nobody
yeah.
likes it. Nobody likes it, but there's a lot of, uh, shrapnel, I guess, people can get hit by, that are doing everything correctly,
Yeah.
but may affect their business too with these types of, changes.
Are there any other things that come up on the agendas of the upcoming conferences around TCPA and other privacy related issues that marketers should be aware of and should certainly keep themselves up to date on?
100%. I mean, I think two of the big ones, right now, that are not law yet, but are potentially likely to become law over the next few months or so, is that a definition of what a robocall is. It used to be sort of an automated, dialer platform, but now it includes AI and text messaging, which, like I just elaborated on, I think that's the text messaging is sort of the dangerous part for some companies. But then also there's a proposed law for opting out of something that it's called a Do Not Disturb Act, I believe. And it's if I can remember correctly, the gentleman Poloni, Plone, I think might be from your state of New York. But they're proposing that any type of opt out of a message will opt out of all messages.
Mm.
So let's just say I'm a Bank of America, and I get a message to for overdraft or something, I don't know, and I say stop. That stop message is opting out of any other text messages from for any other reason, or call from anybody from Bank of America to call me. It's opting. It's like a global opt out, which is kind of crazy, right? Because
Yeah.
you still may want to get that fraud detection email or that text going, "Hey, someone's charged your account. Is that you?" Well, I just said stop, so I can no longer get that message either unless I opt sort of back into it. Another thing, so that's we have to be very mindful of what's going to happen with that, because that can change your whole communication strategy on how people opt out and how you opt in. I think it would probably revert to sort of what people do with email and how they have multiple channels of subscriptions, right? So you can opt
Right.
out of, okay, when I say stop, do you want to opt out of check, one, two, three, four of the ones that you want, or not check, but if it's text, respond one, two, three, whatever, to some combination of what you're actually trying to opt out of. But yeah, listen, this is a big thing, and TCPA is always evolving and always trying to be translated, because some of it's very vague, and there's a lot of gray area on defining certain things that they do on purpose so that it can play out in the court at your expense. So it's always something very, very important for any company that's making phone calls, texts, or anything, that they have to be aware of what's happening.
One thing that's gone through a sort of different waves over the years is it used to be a lot of lead gen companies would actually sell non-exclusive leads
Mhm.
or exclusive leads, right? And you have different price points for each, and it was sort of a weird dynamic because then the onus was on the marketer, because then the marketer knew that three other marketers were getting this lead and were probably calling at the same time, which then might be a race to the bottom, might not be. But then you could, other providers might give you the opportunity to have exclusive leads. There was a time in the EDU category, for example, where the non-exclusive leads were really, really common. And I think now the pendulum has swung towards a lot of the lead gen folks who are like, no, I'm not going to sell this online MBA lead to 16 different MBA course providers, right? Because that's
Mhm.
sort of not good for anybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the person who's opting in, right? Essentially, it's like co-regging into 16 outreach messages at the same time, which isn't necessarily good user experience either. Has there been sort of a a resting place for that kind of behavior? Is pretty much everything exclusive now?
Yeah, well, no. And let me, I'm gonna, before I tell you a little bit about what the FCC's been doing. And by the way, I'm not an attorney. I'm just giving you information that I know, and please double check everything I say, or triple check. But I'm in favor of shopping and comparison shopping. I think
Right.
that's healthy for the consumer to be able to efficiently and effectively shop multiple options of whatever product or service that they're looking for in a concise way. That's good, because now I can say, this is essentially the best offer I have in front of me out of these three choices or whatever it may
Mhm.
be. So that's good. And I also think it's good for the open marketplace too, right? There's competition. It brings price more relative to what it should be and all that sort of stuff. So that's good. I think a one-to-one exclusivity in a marketplace where people are shopping doesn't really exist, right? If a consumer is looking for a solar panel, they're not going to just call one person. At least I wouldn't think they would, unless it was a referral, right? They were going to call probably two or three. Now the question is, are you going to own that, help that process, that consumer through your process, which I believe, is lead generation, sort of that matching sort of engine. I think that's good. Just saying that in general. The FCC though more recently has they called closing the lead generation loophole, I believe is what they called it. And now they are requiring one-to-one consent. So no longer can a lead generation company, I'm just going to say Mike's mortgage comparison website, drive a consumer to a landing page, have them fill out that form, and then somewhere in the disclaimer list a bunch of companies that it might go to,
Mhm.
and check, and then send that lead off to 3 or 4 different banks without the consumer opting into those 3 or 4 banks. Now the FC is going to require, starting January, I think, or February 2025, that a consumer must opt into each company that it's going to go to or that's going to sell them that product. So now, if I'm Mike's Mortgage lead gen shop, I got the form. I have to go find those consumers that want this person, then post their information on the website, and then allow that consumer to check the box, go, yes, I want Bank of America, I want Wells Fargo, and I want Joe's Mortgage down the street to give me a call. I have to check those boxes and then submit it. So it's one-to-one. And I can't, and Joe's Mortgage can't sell that lead to somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay. If Joe goes, oh, I don't want this lead because it's under my loan to value ratio, whatever it is, and I'm going to sell it to Steve over here, Joe's going to be in big trouble with the FCC and have a big fine. We don't know what those fines are going to be, but he's going to be in so no, there's no more age data. There's no more selling of age data that's going to be legal. There's no more brokering per se that's going to be legal. It has to go to the consumer, has to check that name, and it has to go to that company. Hard stop. So I think this is good. I think this is good because one of the big problems that consumers get with all the calls is that that data is being resold, unbeknownst to the consumer. It's being resold multiple times. Age data gets sold, all this sort of stuff, and that's in essence a lot of the problem, right? It's not I'm selling this lead to 3 banks because, like I elaborated on earlier, I think that's a good thing. It's what happens after that.
Right, right. Yeah, it's actually good because that's somewhat consistent with the Federal Trade Commission's general consensus on privacy from a disclosure and control perspective.
Yep.
So it sounds like it's a little bit more just a high level of visibility, co-reg style, right? Where you would affirmatively opt in to whichever of the brands you wanted to communicate with, and maybe a link to their individual privacy policies, so that didn't have any surprises if you chose to actually read them all, which very few consumers did. But keep the lawyers happy, right? Have have all the proper level of disclosure there, and create more like a co-reg offer wall as
Yeah,
opposed to
it is kind of more like that, right? You're checking and it's going one-to-one. Now, the caveat though that this new sort of regulation is inside the TCPA law, so which is based on automated dialers and robocalls. So if you don't use an automated dialer, none of this matters.
Well, other than pissing off your consumer.
Other than pissing off people, but it's just kind of it's sort of silly and kind of funny to some extent. But like that's the thing is like, okay, well, if none of your banks or anybody that's buying your leads uses an automated dialer and they're punching in the phone numbers manually, well then you can still send the lead to whoever you want. They just have to do it. So it's not gonna fix the solution. I think it's going to help a little bit, but yeah, I mean this is where it gets convoluted, right? With what's an auto dialer, what's a manual dial? Is this an automated dialer? It's kind of all over the place, and that's where it gets a little scary for companies that are involved in making calls or buying leads.
Any of the topics that are consistently of interest sort of across the conferences that you run, sort of despite the fact that they're a little bit different, they serve slightly different audiences, but what are the hot topics that people want to hear about for this year?
I mean, I think it's probably, if I asked you the same question, you probably would nail it, right? So it's AI, it's artificial intelligence, of course. It's a machine learning, and which I think are two different things. But it's how do you implement those in optimizing your advertising campaigns, making them more effective, more efficient, but also how do you take all your data and find more in-depth ways to cut it up, slice and dice it, and find those niche success pathways that maybe you didn't know, because now it's so easy to throw data into, chat GPT or whatever it is and say, tell me the top. Like, you don't even have to know what to ask it, right? Tell me what I should know from this data, that would make me more successful with closing these people into sales that want to buy, and it can tell you all these things that would take, $150,000 graduate from MIT to go through, it's at your fingertips. And so people, I think, are trying to figure out, okay, there's this opportunity, this tool out here, these tools are out here. Now I just have to know, where can I implement those things into my current process now that will make me more effective and more efficient in business. And I think that across the lead gen funnel is sort of the general topic everyone's just trying to figure out, because nobody knows what they don't know, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, how do I continue to dig? And they're very eager to hear what people are doing in their own operation. So what some of the most attended sessions are people going, here's what I did with AI, here's what I did with machine learning, and here's what I got out of it. And so it triggers all these other ideas for people. And I think people love that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I certainly know within the SEO side of the conferences I speak at, a lot of the folks are looking at how do I future-proof my SEO against a chatbot where there's no more search engine results page, right? When it's just going to give me one answer,
Yeah.
which is a huge difference, right? I mean, the idea that people might just use their mobile phone and ask it for one hotel or one restaurant or one, whatever it is, auto repair place, right? That's a huge
Yeah.
difference from a
So
search engine result.
what's your recommendation?
Well, actually, it's a combination of digital PR.
Yeah.
You're going to have to up your content game. If you sort of think about how LLMs work, right? They ingest content from every source possible,
Mhm.
and then they, analyze that content to understand the corpus of information. And it's almost trying to, complete the sentence when you ask it a question. And so, in the same way that, Larry Page's PageRank algorithm used links as votes, right? Now it's going to just be the information that the LLMs find are going to essentially skew the results one way or the other. So if you've been, slacking on your content creation, and I'm not just talking about content creation on your own website, I'm really talking about content creation in every possible vehicle, including YouTube, because the transcripts of the YouTube stuff is being transcribed, and that's probably getting ingested at least by Gemini, if not ChatGPT, right? So it's going to use all that really great content, especially content it knows it's human, like podcasts and videos, right? It's going to use that content, it's going to ingest it, and that's going to influence the results, right? So digital PR, and what used to be called Barnacle SEO, right? Which is the
Yeah.
idea that I don't just want to have my own website rank. I want to have as much of the SERP as possible. Those same best practices for Barnacle SEO, including digital PR, content marketing, content syndication, all that stuff is going to positively impact the LLM in preferring you when it's asked questions, right? And then there's some sort of more gray hat things that can be done in the background
Yeah.
to further increase your
Would you
odds.
say that things haven't changed? I mean, because content has always been king, right? I mean, you remember when that was phrased in what 2000, whatever. Yeah. But it's still, what you're telling me, or what I'm hearing from you, is that it's still king.
Yeah,
And is the format at least of that content that because back in the day, and maybe now too, it's still write an article, have your key, your header one, all these sort of different things that would target and link out and all that sort of stuff.
yeah.
Is it still that, or is it, because you mentioned commenting on different platforms and content and all this sort of
Yeah.
stuff? How has it changed beyond that?
It's really just, the content remains king. It's just a little bit more thought needs to go into where the content lives, right? Because it used to be like I would create the piece of content and the default would be it would sit on my site or my blog, right? Now you've got, dozens of choices about where that content sits. Your LinkedIn company page, your personal LinkedIn profile, if you have creator mode turned on, you got Medium, you got, other potential industry publications which may accept guest articles, right? And even if those guest articles don't include any hard links and so don't have any old school link juice associated with them from an AI perspective, that's going to be ingestible content, right? So that's why it looks a little bit more like digital PR, a little bit less like old school SEO, right? But the
Yeah.
content remains king. And the other thing that's changed is the multi-format, right? So it used to be the main reason you would do, YouTube content is because YouTube's the second largest search engine. It's a video search engine,
Yeah.
right? And that would be the only reason. Now you have an extra reason to do it because you believe the transcripts are going to be a valuable source of information to an LLM. So it's really interesting that the foundation of sort of best practices of great content remains there. It's just you have to be a little bit more strategic and holistic about where you deploy it.
Can I ask you one more question since
Sure, absolutely.
I flipped the script on you here and now I'm
Sure.
interviewing you? Is with the ease of content now being able to be generated, right? So I can have you name your GPT and say create a content marketing plan for 90 days. Here are the general topics, come up with them, and then have them write all the articles and post
Right.
all this sort of stuff. The dissemination of content is uber easy now, right? So it's I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of content out there, right? That could be
Yeah.
easily generated and distributed. Do you find that is could negatively play on SEO efforts that are solely focused on content distribution?
Yeah, I think it's always fun to put yourself into the mindset of the Google engineer, right? And if you look
Yeah.
at the last year, there's been a couple of iterations of the helpful content update and a reviews update. But in particular, if you look at the helpful content update and even the way it's named, right? The content has to be helpful. And what I find is that when you ask for an AI to generate some content, it's not always helpful because it's regurgitating what's already out there,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Whereas us having this conversation is more likely to be helpful, right? Because it's new and it's authentic, right?
Hmm.
And so there may be some nuggets in there that are helpful. And so if you sort of think about, well, what is Google already doing to its algorithm to future-proof itself against getting spammed, right?
Hmm.
Is it
Hmm.
starting to probably say, well, we're going to think a lot more about, who created the content and what is the format of the content. There was a brief period of time where like authorship was hypothetically going to be important, not just where is the content, i.e. the New York Times, but which reporter wrote it. And then for a while that sort of disappeared. I think that's probably going to come back, right? Because I think uh, knowing sort of whose name is associated with the content and whether they watermark the content or not, they're saying that they may actually watermark the AI generated content. So if you don't massage it and improve it, it'll be obvious, right,
Hmm. Hmm.
to Google and to others that it's AI generated. Not that there's necessarily an inherent bias against AI content. I think again, if it's helpful and it's useful,
Yeah. Yeah.
where it came from is going to be less important, right? It just needs to be helpful, useful. It needs to delight the consumer, like the searcher, right? If
Yeah.
the searcher continues to be delighted, then that's the primary mission of the search engine, right? Is the happy searcher. So I do think you have to, while it would seem like the cost of great content is actually approaching zero on the textual content side of things, we may want to think like a Google engineer and say, well, does that mean that Google engineers might start to prefer content that comes from non-textual sources because it's took more energy and effort to create? We don't know, right? But it is fun to place yourself into the mind of the engineer, right? And think through, well, because they're going to have a problem to solve.
Yeah, it's really intriguing, and I'm interested to continue to follow and hear what you have to say about it as it continues to evolve.
Yeah, it's a super interesting category. What other topics for your upcoming conferences are you excited to hear the panels when they get up there to present?
One of the things that we try to do at the conferences, and so this will be a sort of a general answer to your question, but I really love hearing those case studies, right? So when a brand can get up there, or even a marketing agency can get up on stage and really dive into new strategies that they're utilizing, like having you talk about like what's going on and how you're sort of implementing these new content strategies. I am personally am most interested in that because I think no one I get tired of hearing sessions that are very so high level, that are just like, in the clouds. Oh, and oh, this is going to happen, and blessing you with this information that I can't have to take no action on.
Right.
I want to hear. I love hearing when companies could go up there and go, "Hey, we tried this, and sometimes we messed up. It didn't work." That's great content. When you
Yeah,
when
for
you
sure.
find something that doesn't work and people are willing to share with that with you, I love hearing that stuff because I just think it's just so helpful when people go. Because I gotta say, when I started these conferences 4 years ago, 20 January 2020, right before the pandemic started, right before 2 months before we shut down, I got into the conference business. But before that, I was obviously an attendee. I was an exhibitor. I was a sponsor, running an agency and all this sort of stuff. So really, when I program these shows, it's really for me.
Mhm.
It's really what I would want to what I would want to hear, or what I want to know about, or what I think is interesting. And granted, I'm not saying I don't take feedback from everybody. I absolutely do. But that was the genesis of the show. Is I want to create a show that I would like to go to. I would like to create a conference that I would like to exhibit at, where people are actually coming into the exhibit hall all the time. Those types of things. So that's sort of my perspective on the content. It's really for me.
So you can't really give us an exact set of data with regards to whether or not conferences are back in comparison to pre-pandemic because you started them right before the
Yeah.
pandemic. But do
Yeah.
you get a sense as to like that there's this pent-up demand from sales teams, from marketing teams, and from the attendees? Like, I want to get out there and I want to have conversations with people face to face, in person, over beers to learn that way. Like, I'm sick of podcasts, I'm sick of webinars. I'm sick of white papers. I want to get out there and have a conversation.
Yeah, here's what I can tell you. I can't give you, the 5 years pre-pandemic numbers and then tell you how it got affected because of what you just said. But what I can tell you is that over that 2020 and 2021, there was so much pent up demand for in-person meetings and getting in touch and shaking hands, or even fist bumping, whatever the heck it was, at that time, because it's human nature
Right,
to connect. And granted, we can connect here on the Zoom call, and it does satisfy a certain need, but it doesn't meet the same need that it is when we can sit down next to each other over lunch and talk about something, or we can connect with each other like in that form, have that energy exchange.
right,
Um, and so there was when things opened back up, people were running to the conferences, right? Because one is a lot of business gets done at conferences. I would say, especially in this industry, a good 80% of the business that is done, new business is done in face-to-face meetings and meeting people at conferences. I could be wrong. I just made that number up, but I think it's a lot. I think it's a
right.
lot, right? Than doing cold calls and doing all this sort
Yeah,
of stuff. But there was, I think the pendulum swung a little bit, right? So there was so much demand. There was a lot of shows that came onto the market too. And now, I think there's a lot of shows, and people budgets were still, kind of, not quite all there. And so they had to pick and choose what shows to go to. So while I think there was a lot of pent up demand, I think there's also a lot of shows, and a lot of options for people to go to. And so it requires a show to really think about it, not just be on autopilot and say, okay, well, if I build it, they'll come. Yeah, they may come. But how can you really exceed those expectations and provide value and provide business opportunities at every conference? Because they do have options.
right, right. Yeah, it just flew into my head that, show content is just yet another piece of content that is good for SEO, right? And so I think from a social media and social proof, like there's so many additional layers to why conferences and events are important, right? From a marketing perspective, that people aren't even necessarily factoring in.
Yeah, I mean, thought leadership is extremely powerful. You know this firsthand, right? So
Yeah.
when you can have thought leadership in your specific market or industry and display that thought leadership in front of 50 or thousands, that is very meaningful and creates an impression on people. It
Right.
creates trust. And so, that's if you're talking about sales, trust and thought leadership are two very, very important aspects that need to be in that, period where you're learning about the other person or the product or service or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I'm not just saying this because I own a conference. I think I generally think it's really important. I did the same thing when I was an attendee, was try to get on stage and try to talk about the things that I thought could help other people. And that's what's important, is how can you share information to other people that will help them, not sell to them. Because
Right.
that's that's a thin veil that people see right through when you're just trying to sell things.
Mm-hmm. Cool, cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing your plans for the upcoming conferences. I look forward to watching the agendas evolve as they get closer and participating in some way or attending.
100%. Well, I definitely want to have you. I am now really intrigued on the SEO front and how this is all going to affect our next show for Lead Generation World. Is not till next January, so we're a little ways off, and there's going to be
Right.
a lot of development from there. Contact IO, which is all pay per call and outbound sales calls, is in August. And I'm not sure SEO would be the best appropriate conversation for that show, but I
Right.
definitely I'm intrigued.
Cool, cool. Well, it's a pleasure chatting. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.